My cat ready to be internet famous? Is she down
Over
there?
here.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen of the COG Stream Punk event, hello. My name is Philip Porta, modern alchemist. Cat Some of ready
E
you to be might know me internet as a famous? Is magician. she Some down of you there? might know me as a PhD in physics. Many of you know me as being sort of the unofficial potions master of COGS in a way, because I hosted the tasting events, the spirit tasting events last year. And boy, do I wish I wasn't in my own dining room right now. Boy, do I wish I was with you all, hanging out at COGS, sending everybody off on a Sunday. But hey, here we are, and we're going to make the best of it. So, if you saw me on Friday's stream, I had a little pre-recorded spot where I showed you a simple cocktail that you could make with only one bottle. Guess what? I'm fulfilling my promise. I'm here with a couple other cocktails that are going to take just one spirit and one spirit only, so that way you can make them with stuff you've probably found around your house. The cocktail I'm drinking right now, by the way, is one of the easiest cocktails to make. It's a refreshing cocktail. It's a summer cocktail. And if you're noticing all of the rum I have at my disposal, you're probably guessing correctly. It's a daiquiri. Lovely, light, tropical drink. Very refreshing. However, it's one of those cocktails that you can get wrong, and you might have it, and you might think you've done something wrong. And the reason is I have 4 very different bottles of rum in my house. This particular daiquiri is made with a Flor de Caña 7-year. It's an aged rum. It's very mellow. It's very smooth, as opposed to on the literal other end of the spectrum, a Gosling's Overproof 151 rum. It's dark, it's caramel, but it's harsh. Then you got Bacardi, the all-around rum that most of you I'm sure have, which makes a nice, light, refreshing daiquiri, but it's very different. And then right here is the Appleton Estate, and you can see in quarantine, we're running out. Send help, please, to Pennsylvania, where the liquor stores are closed to walk-ins. It's a funky rum. It's got grassy notes. It's very different. So depending on what you do and what rum you have in your kitchen, your mileage is going to vary on this very simple cocktail. The other 2 things you need: lime juice, fresh if possible, but again, send help. And also simple syrup. Now, I mentioned simple syrup in the Friday video. I did a honey syrup on Friday, but this is just simple syrup. This is 1 part Demerara sugar to 1 part water. Put it on the stove, let it come to a simmer, bottle it. This will keep in your fridge indefinitely. And by the way, for those of you that like cold brew coffee, and you're like, oh, I love a cold brew in the morning, but my sugar doesn't dissolve, make that, and your problem is not a problem. Bonus there for everybody. But this daiquiri over here, okay, this very simple daiquiri uses 2 ounces of rum, 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup, and 3/4 of an ounce of lime juice each. Here's my advice: you got to work with what goes for you. If I had used the 151, the overproof, I would have put probably another 1/4 ounce to a 1/2 ounce of simple syrup to tone down that burn. If I was working with the Bacardi, I would have upped the lime, because Bacardi doesn't have a whole lot of flavor. So it depends on what rum you use. You're going to change those proportions, but basically you're looking at a 2 to 1 to a half ratio, depending on your rum. Please try it out, experiment. I want to know. And then also, fun little fact, just because I'm into the history of these kinds of things. In 1936, Bacardi actually won a lawsuit because during Prohibition, the Bacardi cocktail had become a thing. And they were upset that people weren't making it with Bacardi rum. So they took people to court, and they realized that, yes, it actually is a trademark of Bacardi. So to make a Bacardi cocktail, legally, you're obliged to use Bacardi rum. And just in case you're wondering, I don't think it's a recipe. I think it's poppycock, to not swear on the stream. It's 2 ounces of Bacardi, 1 ounce of lemon or lime juice. So they're not even committing in their own recipe that they have trademarked, which I think is legally horrible. And then 2 dashes of grenadine. So that's another pretty simple cocktail. If you have a bottle of grenadine at home, switch over from Shirley Temple, make yourself a Bacardi cocktail. But then I said I would give you the simplest cocktails possible. The simplest cocktail I know of is a 2-ingredient cocktail. And it's another legal case cocktail. It's a dark and stormy. And if you've never made it, it's 2 ounces of Gosling's rum and 2 ounces of Gosling's ginger beer. And to legally not be sued by the Gosling's company, just like Bacardi, dark and stormy is a registered trademark of Gosling's. If you aren't making a dark and stormy with Gosling's, it's not allowed to be called the dark and stormy. So my riff on that ridiculous thing was, I did this over Christmas. and I made these with the flor de cana up at my in-laws' place, and I used 2 ounces of the flor de cana and 4 ounces of ginger beer with maybe a quarter ounce of lime in there. So I've changed the recipe. I'm calling it a mostly cloudy. But just to get, yeah, there's no, listen, I'm Captain Dad joke. Ask my physicist.
It's a good one.
Thank you. I handed it to my father-in-law, and he tastes it, and he goes, "Oh my God, that's deadly." And it will go down so smooth. And I'm not saying I recommend necessarily Goslings over the Flor de Cana for that, but they're very, very different depending on the rum you've got. So right there, that's the start of the thing, and that's what I promised I would bring to everybody in my 15-minute spot. So I just want to turn it over to you and to the chat and everybody that's out there in COG Streampunk land and ask me any questions you've got. I've got some resources over here. I'm going to answer every question that you have. Tell me what's in your bar. I'll try and make a cocktail for you. I don't know. Let's see how this goes. I'm going to keep drinking in the meantime. Yeah, that's good. All right. So, how's it going so far?
I like some of the comments here about the Stark and Stormy. One person said cloudy with a chance of lawsuit.
Oh, winner! Where's what? I need like a belt. That's who said, whoever, give them a cookie or something. That's fantastic.
You owe them a drink at the next
Yes, I owe them a drink whenever we get together again. Who was that? Put them on a list or something.
Yeah, that was Andrew. So, Andrew, you're getting a cookie or a drink.
Andrew, whichever you prefer. I may have cookies. I don't know.
We got a question from Jenny and Joe. If you make your own simple syrup, what's the ratio?
Hi, Jenny and Joe. It depends, actually. This is kind of fun. I use 1-to-1. And let me tell you, when you do it, you put a cup of sugar in a cup of water. It does not look like it's going to dissolve. It really doesn't. Put it over low heat, keep stirring, and eventually it dissolves. There are recipes out there in the world that call for rich, simple syrup. And that's a 2-to-1 ratio, which when I started doing this years back, I did not think you could dissolve 2 cups of sugar in 1 cup of water. And I'm like, this is not going to work. I don't know why I'm trying this. And then like 5-10 minutes later, after it heated up, it turned into this thick, viscous, very rich, simple syrup. Generally speaking, 1-to-1 will get you the most mileage for your dollar. And I'm not using any fancy syrup, Demerara, or any fancy sugar. Demerara is readily available in your supermarket. And honestly, I use just regular white sugar to make a simple syrup. It's really easy. And since you asked, actually, I was going to close with this, but it came up. If you really want to take your cocktails to the next level and you don't have a whole lot of extra alcohol, my big tip is actually the syrups. Start with 1 cup water and 1 cup sugar, and then throw in a cup of fresh fruit like raspberries or blackberries. I've made blackberry simple syrup. Throw in just a 1/4 cup of spices. I make cinnamon syrup that I use for my cocktails. Either a couple cinnamon sticks, or if you get ground up cinnamon, not ground up, but crushed up cinnamon, throw it in there, let it simmer, or a 1/2 cup of fresh chopped herbs. I actually have, in reference to the rum cocktails, I don't like getting green stuff stuck in my teeth when I drink a mojito. So I made mint simple syrup last year, and I just took like a bouquet of mint, chopped it down, got a 1/2 cup of mint, threw it in with the simple syrup, let it simmer. And let me tell you, the mint simple syrup will last longer in your fridge than the fresh mint will for the cocktail, and it tastes great. So, and now this is where you're going to be like, he's weird. I'm not going to argue. But I also have basil simple syrup sitting in my fridge right now. A friend of mine back in January or December at some point had asked for her restaurant for me to design a couple cocktails for her using sake and shoju, and I found that the vegetal notes of the basil balanced some of those wonderful flavors that you find in these funky kind of liquors, and I think it's a wonderful thing you can do. So my big hint is go 1-to-1 with the simple syrup, keep that, but then have fun, try it. Put some lemon peels in it, get lemon simple syrup, all kinds of stuff. Get down with your bad selves.
KP wants to know something. She had a catastrophe the other day. She wanted a Bloody Mary and had no Worcestershire sauce. Any cures for this?
Oh my goodness. Okay, KP wanted to. KP making a Bloody Mary. There's a couple of things that you can do that come to mind. The first thing is you got to look at the ingredient you're looking at, right? So Worcestershire is this very savory kind of ingredient. The first thing that pops into my mind, bear with me, soy sauce. Because it's got that same kind of deep, rich, brewed umami flavor. So it's entirely possible to substitute soy sauce if you happen to have it lying around. If you don't and you need an umami flavor, the next thing that comes to my mind is actually something from a couple of vegetarian cooks and vegan friends of mine, which is what's the yeast? What's that yeast? Nutritional yeast.
Oh, yeah.
Actually has an umami kind of flavor to it. So it's entirely possible you throw that in the shaker, and then as you're shaking out the cocktail, run it through a strainer to take out the yeast, so that way you kind of get some of that flavor soaked in there. So that's another thought that comes to my mind. The other one, and now I'm going to references because I have books, is a cocktail which is actually insanely popular in Canada. It's called a Caesar. So if I have any of my Canadian friends out there, Deb, if you're out there, hi. It's in here somewhere, is actually the gin version, and possibly, your history may vary, the original version of a Bloody Mary, and it might predate it, but I don't want to spend all my time going through a book. I'm going to try and look for it. But those are the first two thoughts that come to my mind. So KP, I hope that helps out there. And also KP, if you are the person I think you are, and I think you are because I think I know people, hang on, because there's a gin cocktail coming for you as well.
Oh, good, because there's a gin question. What is the She-Hulk Barbie, whose name I love, wants to know what is the best flavors for gin and tonics, specifically lemongrass versus cucumber, ?
Oh, I think you're hitting it on the nose. Gin goes so nicely with so many flavors, and it really kind of, just like the rums, it comes down to the type of gin. The good thing is there's a limited amount of. How did I not do that? The thing is alphabetical. Well done. Thank you, Thing.
The index.
The index is good. Yes, an idiot. Don't mind me. I have a PhD, but I can't use an index. Don't worry. I swear, I'm a doctor. Where was I? Right. Sorry. The gin depends. I like a little bit of lime in my gin and tonic. Cucumber works really well with gin. In fact, if you've had Hendrick's gin, there's gin out there with cucumber notes in it. And I see is thrilled with that. Yeah, I love Hendrick's. It's nice, it's light, it's floral. That being said, that word floral also could key you into a couple of other notes that you might want to throw in there. I have rose water in my bar. If you want a floral nose to your gin and tonic, drop a rose water. There's two rules I have. Don't ever use more than a drop of rose water, and don't ever use more than a half ounce of Campari. If you do that, you're doing it wrong. It goes a lot with the gins. I like lime. Lemon will work. If you have lemongrass, great. Or lavender, I think would be my next go-to in that one. And if you saw the video on Friday, I had lavender I dropped into 2 ounces of gin. You shake that up. You leave it to the side for, it's only 2 ounces, so that was like 2 hours. And you get like this little floral note on your gin. So for mixing your gin and tonic, that's my recommendation. And let me head this question off because every now and then I've been asked about gin and tonic and I get this. I don't have a preferred tonic water. I really, really don't. Store brand has worked for me, and Q Tonic has worked for me. Fever Tree has worked for me. They're all really good. They're all just very different, and it depends on the gin you're looking at. When I do a gin and tonic, I actually don't like a London Dry. I like mine a little on the sweet side, so I'll go for an American style or a Plymouth style gin, and I'll sweeten that sucker up just a little bit. What other questions we got?
Oh yeah, we got actually Matt Black is looking for a new tequila cocktail. You got any tequila cocktail ideas?
Matt, you sneaky, I do, and you know I do. I do have some tequila stuff. I've been working on some tequila cocktails over quarantine because my wife, who by the way is Thing when you see the hands in the videos, that's my wife behind who's moving the thing. I had been working on a couple of tequila cocktails. I'm going to give you one that is not in the upcoming sequel to the Necronom Nom Nom, because I don't know if I'm allowed to give away the one that's there. So I'll give you one that's got a funny story with it. This is not a simple cocktail, by the way, but it's doable. And it's a 5-ingredient guy. So it's not ridiculous. But my dad, who is in New Jersey, and I don't know if you're, hi Dad, and he gave me a great idea for a cocktail once. He said, hey Phil, I got lemon ice and I put tequila in it and it tastes great. And after I got over the initial shock of like, oh, I know where I get my tendencies from, I thought to myself, you know what, that's not a bad flavor pairing. How do I replicate that in a cocktail? And I named the cocktail after him, or specifically his nickname. He was a middle school science teacher, 7th grade for 34 years before he retired. And every summer when I was a kid, he worked construction. And so you got this 60-year-old dude climbing the rafters, and everybody nicknamed him El Gato Viejo. So this is that cocktail, the old cat, and I named it after him. So here is the cocktail inspired by my dad, Bobby Laporta. It's an ounce of limoncello, an ounce and a half of silver tequila, a 1/4 ounce of mezcal, 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice, and a 1/2 ounce of mint syrup. And if you don't have mint syrup, grab some fresh mint, spearmint preferably, muddle that lightly before you put it in the shaker, shake it up, and pour it over ice. And you are going to have a tequila cocktail where you've got this lovely, strong, clean agave flavor, but behind it, you're getting this wonderful, fresh, sweet lemon. And I credit my dad with that idea because I would not have been crazy enough to try that stuff at all. So there's that. So Matt, there is your brand new tequila cocktail to try. I'm not giving away the other one because that's way too good. I want to hang on to that until it's published. And KP coming back. The Caesar. Oh, son of a, it's not a gin. Never mind. I lied. That wasn't a gin cocktail. I thought it was a gin cocktail. I was wrong. I knew there was another one called the Caesar, and it was the original version of Bloody Mary. So real fast, an ounce of vodka, 4 ounces of Clamato, specifically Clamato, salt and pepper, Worcestershire, and horseradish, and celery salt. That's the original version, the Caesar. You could trace it back a little further than the Bloody Mary. But as with all cocktails, especially since Prohibition basically erased and made clandestine 10 years worth of cocktails, I mean, you know, it's hard to trace some of this history. Give me one more question as we pan over.
Yes. One more question I got for you is, while you're coming up with all these new cocktails, how about one for amaretto?
Oh, listen, amaretto. Actually, there was one I made that I called the Sicilian Summer. Who's asking that? Because I love amaretto. That's one of my favorite.
That's KP asking that question.
That is one of my favorite after dinner drinks, and I came up with one because occasionally, not always, I can drink amaretto straight all day. But I did want it. There it is, Sicilian Summer. I wanted to tone it down and make it a little less cloying and a little less thick. And so this is what I came up with to sort of balance it. I think it works nicely. I've only made this, I think, for me and for you. I don't think anybody else has had it, but when you hear it, you're going to be like, yeah, I want that. So I have 2 ounces of pineapple juice, 2 ounces of amaretto. Now here's where it gets a little weird, but again, you can up your liquor cabinet. 1/2 ounce of Fuji apple infused famous grouse scotch, give me a minute, and a dash of Angostura bitters. And I think that makes a really nice light cocktail. It lightens up the thickness of the amaretto. The scotch gives it a little bit of depth. The pineapple just kind of loosens things up quite a bit, and it stretches everything out. The Fuji apple infused scotch, shout out to one of the guys who I learned a lot from, who's no longer with us, Ryan Snyder, you beautiful bastard, whose tagline on my podcast, The Whip Around, was slinging gin and endorsing sin. And boy, do I miss him. But he was the first one to tell me about Fuji apple infused. Grab like 3 apples, a bell jar, and a bottle of scotch. Cut up the apples, drop it in the jar, pour in the bottle of scotch, shake it up, wait 5 days, and you have a cheap blended scotch that gets so mellow and such wonderful flavor. That being said, you know, get down with whatever scotch you've got there, KP. If you've got a little bit to give it a little bit of depth, if you want to lighten up with the pineapple juice a little bit, peel that back, have fun. But I will say this also about amaretto. One of my favorite amaretto cocktails is an amaretto sour. And I think the best way of making this better, it's going to sound strange, but hear me out, is to take an egg white, or half an egg white, depending on the size of the amaretto sour. Number one, no sweet and sour mix. Equal parts lemon juice and simple syrup always. 2 ounces of amaretto. I'll go with 3/4 of an ounce of lemon and 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup, so I don't kill the amaretto that much. I'll go with an egg white, preferably a medium egg white. I don't want anything too much. And I'll put that in the shaker without ice, dry shake it to get a foam, drop the ice in, shake it to chill it. And also 2 dashes of Angostura bitters, because it'll add a little bit more depth and complexity, but you get this nice mouthfeel, this foaminess, this little, it's so much nicer than just a plain sour. If you're making a sour, like a whiskey sour, try throwing an egg white in there. Fresh eggs, of course, please. And by the way, cookies, I have cookie recipes that only use egg yolks. So, I know if I'm making sours, I'm making cookies, just for the record. But as promised, before I run out of time, I want to do one last cocktail for everybody. And whoop, thank you, Thing. This is a simple gin cocktail. It's a little bit more different than the first one. And it requires 1 extra liquor, but I think it's a worth it cocktail. So you've got your chilled cocktail glass, which isn't as chilled, but I keep these in the freezer because why not? I'm a fancy boy. I like to use an American gin, nice, light, and sweet. I'm going to go with New Amsterdam. 2 ounces of New Amsterdam gin. The original recipe, by the way, calls for an ounce of Cointreau. I don't carry Cointreau. I use triple sec. It's an orange liqueur. It's sweet. It's not got as much depth as Cointreau, but hey, who's going to argue? And then again, just an ounce of lemon juice. And this cocktail is a old classic, and it's called a White Lady. I didn't make up the name. It is just what it is. And basically drop that into a tin that's got ice. Give it a hard shake. I don't strain this one out because I like the little bits of ice in there. I think they give it a little texture, pop to the drink. Strain it out, and you see why it's got its namesake. Hopefully, it's nice and foamy and frothy. I'm going to push the whole thing forward because I don't trust myself not to spill it because I'm a closet. But this is the drink that actually made me like gin. I did not like gin, but I found this drink to be just incredibly refreshing. This is a great summer cocktail. It's not one ingredient only like, the bee's knees, but I think it's a wonderful light cocktail for anybody. If you like gin, try it this way. Try it with all different gins. You might find one you like. One last cocktail tip in general, real fast, is the original recipe calls for a 2 to 1 to a half ratio, which is called the golden ratio. If you're trying to mix cocktails on your own, go with 2 ounces of spirit, 1 ounce of a modifier of some kind, and then a half ounce of the other modifier. So usually it's your spirit, your sweetener, and then your sourant. If you try that ratio in some way, you will actually accidentally make like 1,200 cocktails that actually exist already. But that's my fast, bonus kind of lesson for everybody out there. Just try that ratio. It's hard to screw that up. You'll find something that exists. We have a little, I guess we have a little bit of time. I know I'm way over what
we are, but we've got some time before the next person comes up. So there's actually 2 more questions here if you have the time.
I can kill time. I'm good at vamping.
Wonderful. So the 2 last questions. One is about the egg white. What specifically does it do? Is it just making it that foamy texture?
You're going to get that foamy texture. That's part of it. You're also going to get, I needed extra for that. Thank you. Oh, no, take that. It will give you that texture. It's going to give you a very different mouthfeel. It's going to make everything way thicker. If you have a cocktail without egg white, it's going to be like this White Lady. It's going to be very thin. It's going to be very, very watery. Not just the foam you're going to get on top from the egg white, because you will get like this floating foam on your cocktail when you have egg white in it. But the whole cocktail itself will have some of that egg white mixed in. It's going to be wonderfully smooth and velvety. It's not just the foam. The whole cocktail takes on a different mouthfeel, which is quite lovely. It's weird if you've never had egg white in a cocktail and if you've never tried it. I know people are hesitant, salmonella and this and that, but if you have fresh eggs, you really don't have to worry. It comes out really nicely. I highly encourage trying it.
And then one more. that I thought was interesting. Do you have Never Heard From says, what's your favorite batch cocktail for making a lot for a party?
Right. That's hi, Never Heard From. You're now heard from, so you need to change your username. And my favorite batch. There are a lot of punches out there. Yeah, I mean that's what I was thinking. It's a recipe straight out of Death and Company. It's a little bit complicated, but I like to look up, and I'll tell you this: there are generally punches out there. The punch that I go to is Kill Devil Punch. It's complicated. It uses a lot of things. It's a punch recipe out of, thank you, Ryan, the Death and Company cocktail manual, which I think if you're into cocktails at a level that is beyond just the basics, this is probably the best $30 you can spend for yourself. It's complicated. It's got a lot of ingredients in it. It's rum based. It's got champagne at the end, but it's got raspberries. It's got pineapple juice. It's wonderfully refreshing, and it will knock you down if you are drinking a lot of it. That happened at the New Year's Day party. That was hysterical. But I will say this, and this one's another relatively easy cocktail to finish on. So I'm kind of happy to give you this. I have done this before as well, which is I haven't batched cocktails ahead of time, but what I've done is I've put out a bunch of champagne flutes, plastic. And what I do is you can prep those champagne flutes with various sort of things to mix in and produce champagne cocktails. Of course, for you absinthe fans out there, Death in the Afternoon is a very simple, oh no, wait, is it Death Under a Tree or Death in the Afternoon? Well, any Death in cocktail has absinthe. I think it's Death in the Afternoon. Death Under a Tree is the bookstore version. So I put out just a whole swath of champagne glasses, and in some of them I put like a fruit puree, in some of them I put a little bit of orange juice, and in some of them I made a champagne cocktail pre-made, which is you put a sugar cube at the bottom, you hit it with 3 dashes of Angostura bitters. And then when you pour champagne on top of it, your champagne is incredibly flavored. So another fancy way, really fancy, let's be honest, it's probably overly fancy, but prepping a bunch of champagne cocktails and flutes is another really fun way to prep cocktails without really prepping it. And then your guests can kind of choose your own adventure if they're like me, kind of like that. The champagne cocktail is one of the easiest. Oh, and then of course there's the French 75 you can prep in a champagne flute, which is it's an ounce of gin, a half ounce of lemon juice, and then you pour champagne on top of it, and that's a French 75, which is a Tom Collins with champagne instead of club soda, which is another 1 bottle cocktail, which I don't know why.
Wow, that sounds really good.
So yeah, I mean, again, I'm looking at my clock. I don't want to run into the next guy's time.
Yeah,
so,
we're about out of time, but that was awesome. You answered a lot of questions from the chat, which is good.
I tried, and hopefully the universe cooperates and we all get to see each other in person in the fall. Shoot me a message on Facebook, and if you want to hear more of me and my hijinks, follow my podcast also on Facebook, The Whip Around. We come out every Wednesday with new shenanigans. We're a weird news podcast. Most of the time, we're recording today for this coming Wednesday, so I'll be mentioning the COG stream, and I will be drinking on the podcast. So you'll hear about that, and you'll hear me being goofy. It's a great time. Join me there. Send me any questions. Find me on Facebook, Philip R. Laporta. I'm there. Happy to be your friend. Happy to answer questions. And, may your COGs never rest, everybody.
That's right.